Jeff Gibbons here with another YouTube video, and in this one I'm going over Native Instruments' newest instrument called Pharlight. So this one just came out and I've got a couple of little ideas to show you, and then I'm going to walk you through some of the basics of it, just a really quick video. And in the future I will do a much more detailed video based on the manual. So this instrument is made by the same people that made Straylight, and it looks very similar. So if you understand that one, you'll understand this one for sure. This one is definitely geared towards vocal type sounds. So we've got all of these different vocal things recorded, and then they've gone through and made their own snapshots or presets. So let's get right into it. I'll show you a couple of little ideas, and then we'll just talk a little bit about the basics of the interface of the software. Here we go. So this idea here started with this landscapes patch, a short bass sound. And then next we've got one called Absolute Ceiling, which is just kind of a choir sound. And then I use kits from Anima Ascent, which is the latest expansion put out by Native Instruments. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. And that one, just a basic drum kit in there. And then I have a couple other Pharlight patches. So we've got one called Empty Arena. They've got a bunch of these patches that they call hooks. And then we've got one called Dream. What is this one? So that's that little idea. Very simple, but gives you an idea of some of the bass patches that we've got in there. All right, so this next one, I started with, and when I first loaded the patch, it was at a different speed. So I opened up the Pharlight interface here, and I just played with the speed right on this center XY axis right here. And I got it to where the speed was close enough, and then I played this in. And then what I wanted to do was actually take that whole 8-bar phrase and slice it up in Machine. So this is a little bit more specific to Machine users. All I did was click this button right here, and then it exports that whole 8-bar chunk. While the mouse is pressed, I can drag it onto a new group, chop it up, slice it up. And so that's what I did with that one. So I dragged that onto a new group, and then I was able to play it from the pads like an instrument. And then we've got another thing. I've got a bass in there. It's got like some vocal thing over top of it, which actually kind of worked. And then I've got another kit from Anima Ascent. Just played that one in. And what else we got? A lead sound. I think that was from the hook category as well. That patch is called Grain Girl. Really nice little patch. And then we've got a piano sound. And that's about it. So let's have a listen to the whole thing. I've got two scenes on this one. Instantly inspired by these patches, right by that first little pad that I loaded up. And then these leads, really nice patches. I'm quite impressed with the patches. Let's look at one more idea, and then I'll just go over the interface really quickly. So this one, much more ambient than the stuff I normally do, but I love that kind of stuff too. And the first patch is called Music for Landscapes. So maybe a little Eno nod right there. We've got another patch in here. I love that kind of stuff. Reminds me of Fever Ray. We've got another one, Spoon. Spoon Man just had a neat sound to it. I love that kind of stuff. I love Jean-Michel Jarre, and he would use all these kind of neat synthy things that would just kind of, textures that would build in and out. Really nice patch. And then we've got a pluck sound, which is this one right here, called Me and the Moonquake. Really beautiful ambient stuff. And then I've got a burn kit from Anima Ascent. So that is this tune. Let's play it one more time. All right, so let's just have a quick look at the interface itself. All right, so from this main window, you can see the two different layers that you have in your patch. And on the left-hand side, you see that we've got a granular synthesizer, and on the right-hand side, we've got a sampler. And you can turn them on and off with this little black button. So with this little XY controller here, we can assign it to different parameters, and then of course we can control it with hardware. But in this case, we are controlling the filter from left to right. And then we're controlling the cursor position in the grains here when we adjust that other controller. So if I move this side by side, we can see that moving. So for browsing patches, there's a couple ways to do it. You can click on this little drop-down menu here. You'll find pads and atmospheric patches and hooks that have sounds that would be great on pop tunes as kind of a synthy vocal kind of thing. But you can also click right here, and that loads up this little snapshot browser. So if I go right there, and then I go over to something like bass, I can see the bass patches. I take it off hook. Now I can see any patches that have bass sounds in them or bass characteristics to them. I can go over to atmosphere right here, take it off bass, and now I've got all of my atmospheric patches. But if I want to then thin this out and say, okay, give me atmospheric patches that are rhythmic. So now I click on the rhythmic ones, and I'm only going to get the rhythmic patches. So hopefully we get a browser like this in Massive X soon, because this is really nice. It's just kind of the browser that we need. And then of course you can put a little star beside any patches that you really like. And then there's the grain side and then the sample side. So you can also choose from your grain menu right here. So your grain source, you can go through all of the different grain sounds, and then we can go over to the sample source over on the far right and choose some kind of sample voice. So let's try this JX voice. So the grain menu is going to be specific to the grain layer over here, and then we can do all sorts of things with that. Like let's turn off the grain or the sample for a second. We'll just put on the grain. So here we can see a sample, and then what we're doing is we're chopping that sample into little tiny chunks. That's what a granular synthesizer does. Let's find a sample that is very obvious. So we'll try this phrase, get down. This should be fun. So we're going to load that one up. And then what I need to do is get this grain so we can hear the sample. Get down. So we can hear get down. And then what we can do is we can set our grains so that things get really small. So we can say just a really small little chunk. Get down. Get down. Get down. Get down. Now we make them a little bit more percussive by changing the fade in and the fade out of each grain. Get down. Get down. Let's make the interval a little faster now. Get You start to get an idea of how a granular synthesizer works. It's not actually that complex, but understanding how these controls change things is important. So let's change the range so that the range is only going to be a very tiny amount of this sample. So I'm just going to try. And then now I can lock this one so that it's locked to the beginning, and then as I move it, it's going to stay with it. So playing around with just a bunch of the parameters on the granular synthesizer, you start to see how much fun you could have with just a vocal phrase of some sort. You know, just play around with the start time, the size of the grain, all of that kind of stuff. So I'll get more into detail in that in a future video. So let's go over to the sampler and just have a quick look at that. And we can see I've got my sample loaded in there. And we can do the regular stuff to this one. We can put a filter on it. We can choose the filter from this drop-down menu right here. We've got a filter envelope and an amplitude envelope that we can change here as well. So we can make it release really quickly. All that kind of stuff, the normal stuff we can do with a sampler. Whenever you see parameters with little arrows, there's a little drop-down menu that's going to pop up as well. We go over to effects, and we've got effects that are specific to the grain side, and we've got effects that are specific to the sample side. And then if we go to the master, we've got some effects that we can put on the entire thing. So if I go over to the effects for a second, you can see in this one, I can then go choose different effects to load in each of these spots. So I can click this little button right here, and I can go, okay, instead of these 4 effects, let's put some drive on here as well. So put some drive on, and then now I can adjust those parameters also. You'll see that a lot of the controls have a little slider that pops up right here, and another thing on the side, and then another parameter right here. And this is how we assign modulation in these instruments. So if I go over to the sampler for a second, and then I go over to modulation, this is where I can find things like an LFO, and then we've got a shaper, another LFO, and the XY axis. This is all stuff that we can do to shape the sound over time. If you want to check that out, I could maybe try modulating this filter right here. So what I could do is assign an LFO to this parameter. So I'm going to click right on the top there, choose LFO1, and then now LFO1 is going to be assigned to this parameter. But nothing's going to happen until I click on this parameter and move it up or negative. So I'm going to go positive, and then now we can see the LFO is changing this parameter. And if I want to change the waveform of that LFO, I can click right here and choose triangle, square, so it's on and off. And you see as I adjust the filter knob, that animation sort of goes with it. If you want to reset something, all you have to do is command click on it, and then that will reset this parameter back to 0. We also have macros that we can assign to controls on things like complete control or in machine. So that's kind of an overview of the synthesizer. That was just me playing around with it for a day. So hit the subscribe button and the bell, and we'll see you in the next video.